Most people wonder what it is that criminologists do. Well, criminologists often hold advanced degrees, graduate degrees in the field of criminal justice from accredited universities throughout the world. The popular media often equates criminology as being synonymous with being a forensic scientist or a crime scene investigator or a criminal profiler. But in reality, this type of work would be much more likely to be conducted by a criminalist rather than a criminologist. Even though the two terms sound similar, there are enormous differences. Criminalists have extensive training, usually in molecular biology, chemistry, and medicine, among other disciplines that belong to the harder sciences. In this course, you will be trained to think like a criminologist. And throughout the semester, we will be looking at various criminological theories which attempt to provide viable explanations as to why some individuals break the law. We will also be looking to a lesser extent at the various processes of making laws as well as the societal reaction toward law breaking. Additionally, from time to time, we may consider possible solutions to the problem of crime. As you begin the course, try to reflect upon the fact that criminology is still a very young discipline. Unlike other disciplines which have been around much longer, criminology has yet to develop a single paradigm. For example, in biology, the theory of evolution by and large provides the organizing framework that most scientists in this discipline embrace. In studying criminality and crime, there is much more diversity of opinion and debate across this discipline. This may be due, in fact, this could be partially due at least to the fact that criminologists study very complex behaviors, and often these can be difficult to quantify. Virtually all criminologists are interested in causation. First, there must be what appears to be a logical connection between the two variables. Next, in order for criminologists to demonstrate that one variable may cause another, meaningful attempts are made to show that the independent variables, which are denoted by X and are also known as the predictor variables, precede the dependent variable in time. Often in criminal justice research, the dependent variable, which is denoted by Y, will be the crime rate, while the independent variables may include factors such as race, number of convictions, IQ, religious beliefs, gun ownership, socioeconomic status, gender, as well as virtually any other possible construct which may appear to be related to crime. Often it is not uncommon for independent variables to overlap. Fortunately, most criminal justice and criminologists have strong statistical backgrounds, and they're able to isolate various independent variables, at least to some degree. And while this class is not a course on research methods and statistics, there is no question that statistical software and sound research methodologies are important tools that are utilized in answering various questions posed by criminologists, seeing whether variables are correlated. Armchair theorizing without any attempt to validate a particular research question does very little to advance the discipline. And for this reason, students of criminology must take courses in research methods and statistics. We have come a long way in our attempt to understand the crime problem. The earliest societies relied on customs, magic, and spiritual elements to maintain order prior to the advent of a complex system of law. In pre-literate societies, it was once believed that if you violated a taboo, then it would be necessary for the community to punish you in order to prevent the wrath of supernatural forces. As societies throughout the world have become more civilized, laws have started to be recorded, and they've been recorded now for many millennia. The Code of Hammurabi is one of the first known bodies of law to have survived for study today. While it may seem archaic to some, for its time in 1700 BC, the Hammurabi Code amounted to a brilliant advance in penal philosophy, mainly because it represented an attempt to keep cruelty within bounds. There were very, very barbaric punishments prior to the code, and the code tried to make things a little bit more evenly distributed to some degree. Throughout history, other innovations regarding the society and the rule of law have included things like the Roman creation of the 12 tables in 450 BC, the English common law, and the Magna Carta, which was devised several centuries later in 1215 AD. In this course, we could actually go back to the very beginning of society, and we could look at what is referred to by criminologists as demonology. However, this would be fruitless, in my opinion, because contemporary criminologists have long discounted this theory. In fact, one would be hard-pressed to find even a reference to this in modern textbooks. So rather than looking at magic and spiritual possession, first we're going to focus on the classical school of criminology. The Enlightenment, or the Age of Reason, was a highly significant social movement occurring during the 17th and 18th centuries, and with the help of Cesare Beccaria, it led to the classical school of criminology, which emphasized the notion of free will. People were viewed as having control over their lives. Therefore, crime was explained as a wrongdoing that was guided by deliberate personal choices. Today, most undergraduate students tend to readily embrace the classical school as well as the neoclassical school of criminology. And the neoclassical school of criminology is essentially a resurgence of classical ideals that began in the 1970s. Of all the various schools of criminology, the classical school is perhaps the easiest to comprehend. This might be why students tend to embrace it. It has very simplistic attitudes about offenders and policy solutions. In short, it posits that humans are rational hedonists, and before committing a crime, humans carefully calculate the costs and the benefits. And so in order to deter crime, punishment should always outweigh the benefits to the offender, and the punishment should always exceed the reward of a crime. Neither classical criminology nor neoclassical criminology is overly concerned with addressing the issue of offender motivation. Also, adherents to both perspectives would vehemently disagree that some individuals are driven to crime because of forces beyond their control. On the other hand, positivistic criminology, with its emphasis on determinism, often implies that some individuals are driven to commit crimes. And positivists may attribute criminality to a number of reasons, such as biological, psychological, ecological, and environmental factors, among others. Classical and neoclassical criminology is much more concerned with examining how the criminal law influences criminal offenders. And adherents to these perspectives contend that punishment should be swift, it should be certain and severe in order to deter would-be criminals. Of course, some critics argue that classical and neoclassical criminology do not fare well in explaining non-rational criminal events, such as a murder committed in the heat of passion. Next week, we will begin reading Cesare Beccaria's work on crimes and punishments, and in fact, we will finish that work all in a week. And this represents the foundation for both the classical and neoclassical perspective. The following week we will examine more modern theories that are associated with the neoclassical criminological perspective. And after we fully explore both classical and neoclassical criminology, we will then examine the various theories associated with positivism, and this will take several weeks. This course will also provide insights into the rise and growth of American criminology, which can be traced back to the investigations of two Chicago sociologists in the 1940s. And I would submit to you that in many respects the Chicago School changed the course of criminology by focusing on sociological rather than biological or psychological theories of criminality. And finally, toward the conclusion of the course, we will investigate conflict and labeling theories of crime. These theories, which are often informed by the writings of Karl Marx, among other radical commentators, they became popular in the 1960s when America was in a state of social turmoil. The civil rights movement, Vietnam, Watergate, and other factors, Attica, prison riots, several other things. This prompted criminologists to become distrustful of the government, and they began to question the social order. And as we begin to examine the causes of crime, be mindful of the enormous amount of misinformation that is perpetuated by both the news and the popular media. Several criminologists have in fact made careers out of demystifying and deconstructing the misinformation associated with the infotainment about crime and justice. Throughout this semester, you may reject some of the theoretical explanations that are presented. In fact, I'm sure you will. Many of these explanations may run contrary to various media constructions. Still, I would encourage each of you to keep an open mind, as well as be leery of the information presented in the popular media. In some cases, even news sources which purport to be objective and unbiased are often quite the opposite. In some respects, this may be due in part to the fact that American newscasts rely heavily on corporate sponsorship. It should come as no surprise, then, that news reporters may be tempted to exaggerate, sensationalize, and outright distort crime stories in an attempt to sell papers and receive higher ratings. So to some degree, I suppose we're all victims of the popular media. Still, my hope is that as criminal justice graduate students, you will become excited about learning about criminological theory. And so I invite you throughout the semester to join me as we try to understand what are some of the causes of crime.